In their religion, most human beings are still in the larval stage. We are like maggots living on a piece of dung.
Welcome to the very first episode of CHATROG, the podcast where we explore the ethics of artificial intelligence with those shaping our digital future. I'm Roger Steer, the corporate philosopher, and tonight I'm honoured to be joined by one of the most original and provocative thinkers of our time, Douglas Rushkoff. He's a media theorist, author, and activist whose work has challenged the power structures of big tech and championed a more human-centered digital world. From Team Human to survival of the richest, Douglas asks the questions most of Silicon Valley would rather ignore. Let's dive in. Douglas, welcome to the CHATROG Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey, it's good to be with you.
You've described AI as the next dumbwaiter. You explain this as a sinister concept. Can you unpack that metaphor for us?
Yeah, I don't know if it's so sinister in its intention, but certainly in its result. When I was taught about the dumbwaiter in middle school in the U.S., I remember they said, Thomas Jefferson had the dumbwaiter in Monticello, his mansion in Virginia, and it was there so that his slaves wouldn't have to trudge up the stairs with all this heavy food, that it saved them the labor of bringing it up because they could put it in this tiny elevator and pull a little string and it would appear magically up in the dining room. And if you actually look at Monticello, there are these giant corridors under the ground that the slaves would have to go through with the food, and 2 or 3 staircases where they'd have to crouch to even get up them, and they would bring it to the last level from the basement. And then just the last few feet, they'd put it in a little thing and pull it up. So the dumbwaiter wasn't there to save Thomas Jefferson's slaves the labor of carrying the food. It was there to spare Thomas Jefferson and his guests the indignity of seeing the enslaved person huffing and puffing and sweating and bringing it there. And it made it feel and look like they were saving so much labor and toil. And I call that the dumbwaiter effect because so many technologies that we use, the assembly line, for example, which we say, it was there so we could get more goods faster. No, the assembly line was there, and you don't have to read Marx for this. The assembly line was there so that you wouldn't have to hire skilled labor to manufacture things. You could go to the medieval equivalent of the Home Depot parking lot, find an undocumented alien and train them in 15 minutes how to nail one nail into the bottom of his shoe and pass it on to the next person. So it didn't take away labor. It just reduced the skill set of labor. It de-skilled labor. And artificial intelligence is no different. You put a prompt in a box and you think that the computer or piece of technology is bringing you the answer, but hidden behind that piece of technology are thousands of laborers in the Philippines and around the world who are tagging each piece of data so that it's readable by the machine. There's thousands of enslaved young boys in Africa mining for the molybdenum and the rare earth metals to build the servers. There's all the people who are in America going to be building the nuclear power plants to give the energy for this. So it doesn't get rid of labor. There's just as much or more labor. It's just distanced. It's hidden from us the same way the slaves were by the dumbwaiter.
Indeed. And because there are human beings behind this doing this drudgery in the same way as the dumbwaiter, do you think it's actually going to destroy as many jobs as some of the tech bros are predicting?
Well, it will create jobs in the traditional sense of the word job.
Yeah.
But I don't think these are jobs people want. They're not jobs that elevate our ability to create and share value. They're honest, will be digging more ditches and mining more things until they have robots. But no, I mean, it brings up a more fundamental question, which is, I wanted to avoid AI altogether and just treat it as another NFT or Bitcoin or something, some, stupid fad that doesn't do anything. But I've been kind of dragged back into tech criticism, kicking and screaming, because I'm a humanist. I'm an artist, not a scientist. But the value here is that AI can force us to reconsider some of our social contracts and business plans that we haven't looked at for a long time. I was on CNN, and Jake Tapper was trying to get me upset about AI on a day when I didn't care much about it. And he was saying, well, what about the unemployment problem? And I know this is so hard for people to hear. They can't believe it when I say it. But what I asked him is, well, what about the unemployment solution? Who really wants a job? I would argue most people don't want a job. They want stuff. They want money, maybe. They want meaningful work. They want good relationships. They want to participate actively in the unfolding of the world. But a job? When did jobs come from? And I know it's hard. It sounds crazy. Pretend I'm crazy. Jobs were invented in the late Middle Ages. People didn't have jobs. They worked, they created stuff. They might be a shoemaker making things. They'd go to the village market or the city market and sell the shoes. We didn't get jobs until back in my, book Life Inc. I was writing about this, until the aristocracy realized that they couldn't dominate people after feudalism. What were they going to do? So they invented chartered monopolies, which said that no one's allowed to do work in an industry unless they're chartered by the king. So instead of being a shoemaker, now you were an employee of His Majesty's Royal Shoe Company. And we thought of ourselves as workers, working by time ever since. But that's not the real world. That's not any more natural than any other system.
Absolutely. I remember reading about the Bushmen of the Kalahari today who only spend about 3 days a week laboring. The rest of the time they sing, they make love, they eat magic mushrooms, they have a great time. And, I really, really identify with that vision of yours and that dream because, we do need to do some work. Work can be fun if it's creative and if it's about our relationships. And you're absolutely right. I totally agree with that, with your hypothesis.
We were in the same place. We were in the same place. In late medieval Europe, people worked about 3 days a week. Women were taller in England, in late medieval England, at any time until the 1980s. That's how healthy they were.
I didn't know that. Wow.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
That was just the local markets, local currencies. People got very wealthy, but that was such a problem for the aristocracy. People creating and exchanging value. What are the lords and the dukes supposed to do? The ones who haven't worked in centuries. So that's why they invented central currency. You're not allowed to use these little poker chips of your own design. You have to borrow money at interest and pay it back to us. And if you're going to use any of your own monies, we're going to kill you, which is what they did. Philip the Fair, they sent the Knights Templar in to kill anybody using their own currency. And that same monopoly understanding of business is what is perpetuating today in this AI industry.
Very true. You mentioned Life Incorporated, which I've read a few years ago, which argues powerfully that our daily lives have been corporatized in some of the ways that you've described. Do you see parallels between the fictitious personhood of the corporation and the fictitious personhood of AI, the way it's anthropomorphized?
Yeah, I mean, the easiest way to say it is both corporatism and technology or digital technology involve abstractions from reality. So in business, we know there's a real person creating value, then a company extracting value from that person, and a shareholder extracting value from the company, and a derivatives trader extracting value from the shareholder, and a derivatives exchange person taking value, and so on. The further away you are from the person actually working, usually the more money you're making. That's how capitalism works. You get further and further away from value creation and higher up the food chain of abstraction. And digital technology kind of works the same way, where we're abstracting things on things. So we have human language, and it gets digitized, and then LLMs are using that abstracted language to develop other concepts, and so on and so on. So these two ways of engaging with the world are support one another. Digital technology allowed for ultra-fast trading of algorithms. So we end up in this sort of digital capitalism, this hyper-speed, digitally accelerated form of infinite abstractions. And AI is like the native being of this digital realm. I know it's not alive in the way we think of life, but it's the first, just to use even a technological term, it's like the first native app of the internet. It uses the internet as its content. So it's like meta on the internet, the same way that finance is kind of meta on business. So they've ended up working the same way, in a hand-in-hand way. And yeah, so corporate personhood, corporations have been looking for bodies, ever since they were turned into people. In a side note, in a Lincoln era Supreme Court decision, something was entered in by a clerk. They have personhood. And it's not just personhood, like in quote marks, it's personhood. They have rights of people, but they've never had bodies before. That's been to their advantage, because human beings, we have term limits. We die. They keep going. That's why they can just be patient and wait for another law, wait for another deregulation, wait for another thing. But now, if they're going to have bodies in the digital realm, so they're going to be able to create our digital reality as natives in that space. And that's going to be weird, especially if we're using the digital realm to navigate the real one.
Absolutely. The other thing about the corporation, it was designed as a mechanism to avoid legal and moral responsibility.
Yeah.
And in a way, isn't that how many people are using AI? Because people say, well, it wasn't me. It was, it was Genesis who said that. And do you think there's something there in terms of the avoidance of moral responsibility by big tech?
In a lot of ways. In the very first way we were talking about, that it distances you from the labor. The same way an iPhone, it's this beautiful little Bauhaus device, and you don't see everything it's doing. It's exploitation and extraction by remote control. You're away from it. AI works the same way on a ground level, but yeah, you become like any algorithm. It relieves you of responsibility for the decision. So if a judge is sentencing criminals, he can sleep better at night if he used the algorithm to do that, even if the algorithm turns out to be racist, because it's using past data that was racist in the way decisions were made. It's using things we don't even know, or any of these tools help you feel a little bit more distanced from the thing you're doing. Buying something on Amazon is a lot easier than going to the factory in China where the labor is there and seeing what's actually going on.
Absolutely. So who is AI currently serving, and who is it bypassing or marginalizing?
And it's interesting. There are a lot of regular people it is serving. It's if you're in one of the kinds of jobs that gets, replaced by AI, say a graphic designer or a PowerPoint maker, you're not really being replaced by an AI. You're being replaced by somebody using AI. So there's a few graphic designers and PowerPoint makers and sports writers who are using AI in a way that is increasing their productivity to the point where they can now serve the function of 5 or 10 of the people who formerly used to do that. The same way that Adobe Photoshop and Illustrator allowed graphic designers to do that. And there are some people who are going to be more skilled at this than others. Right now, anybody can make a prompt and get a pretty picture, but you'll see there's going to be when a real designer is using this tool, same as remember when digital synthesizers came out and everybody thought, oh, this is the end of music because anybody can make a violin sound. And still, there's
Absolutely.
master musicians in this world and regular folks. We pretty quickly learned to distinguish between the two. So we'll see. So there are creatives. I've seen writers using it, but the people who do well with it use it in a different way. They use it more the way that like Brian Eno worked with digital samplers. It was very different from somebody just trying to make something that sounds like an orchestra. It's people who are adopting what I've started calling it the generative mindset or generative thinking. People who understand that you're working with something that's more like a fractal. You're setting some conditions and letting it iterate. So you generate technology, or you generate whatever you're producing with the technology, rather than having the technology do it for you. You query and get something back, and then query again. So you're working kind of in partnership with the machine and everyone who's contributed, either willfully or involuntarily, to that machine. But you have something else. So if you're writing music with a chat, you are writing music with Beethoven and the Beatles and Tchaikovsky and everybody else, and all the poor suckers whose non-public domain music and creation has been put in there.
Thank you. I want to sort of return to corporatism, but also bring in the concept of ethical AI. So my next question is, if AI is built on top of what I think you and I agree are extractive economic models, is it possible to build ethical AI at all without rethinking those foundations?
No. I would say the reason why not is unless we were to regulate AI to the point where it was incapable of amplifying anything. So it becomes incapable of accelerating the rate of value extraction from the poor and delivering it to the rich. Then society can't sustain itself. So I don't see us able to regulate something like this. I mean, I don't want to sound leftist. I just want to sound sane. But we've put in place a whole lot of business models and market rules that really were based on 12th and 13th century priorities that were written by people who've long since left the building. Most people don't know that currency and corporatism and the version of free market economics and capitalism that we use today was invented to preserve an aristocracy in the face of a rising middle class of people creating value. I'm not saying commerce is bad. I'm not saying business is bad. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is there are certain biases and rules that favor kind of centralized banking and the extraction of value by long-distance shareholders. And that was because there were chartered monopoly companies in England that were trying to extract value from the East Indies or the West Indies. And so it was a system that was designed with a Hobbesian logic, where he actually said, he wrote out loud, you can think of the people in these places like they're just shrubs or trees. They're just resources. They're not real humans. They're not Christian. Don't worry about it. Just take. And those same value judgments are being made about regular Americans by the elite tech, corporate overlords now. They in their religion, which is called transhumanism, in their religion, most human beings are still in the larval stage. We are like maggots living on a piece of dung. And they, the special, very wealthy, technologically adept minority, are going to sprout their wings and get off the planet or upload their mind or become robots. So they need to build AI in order to iterate the solutions that will allow those few people to get off and then replicate out there in the cosmos. And to them, it is ethical. It is highly ethical. It's called effective altruism. And they found a crazy Oxford philosopher who's happy to get wealthy by feeding their psychosis, who says that it's more ethical to consider the trillions of post-human artificial intelligences that will be spread out through the cosmos, that they're so many more of them, that if 8 billion of us suffer and die today, it's so small in comparison to the greater joy of the trillions of post-human intelligences. So that it's only ethical. It's only ethical to think about them. And where I derive my ethics from a slightly more old-fashioned sensibility about just trying to be ethical in the moment, that the way you treat the other person kind of matters more than that very long-term thinking, and that if you're really treating other people appropriately in the moment, that the future is not something you predict and prepare for like they are. The future is something you create through your actions in the present, which again goes back to my approach with AI, which is we are generating something together right now. It's not an ends justifies the means journey where we put blinders on to the pain and suffering that we create with this stuff.
Absolutely. And you said something there which triggered this question. What would AI look like if it were designed with mutuality, not top-down control, as its core principle? So one of the ethical criticisms I have of the corporation is it's not democratic. It's plutocratic. And for me, democracy, true democracy, must be at the core of any moral community. So what do you think it's possible? Do you think we should pursue some sort of mutuality in terms of the way that we design and deploy this particular tool, this range of tools?
Yeah, I mean, Marina Gorbis at Institute for the Future is trying to get people to build a civic stack, a public AI infrastructure, public AI tools. And what would that look like? it'd be very different, right? We could program it very differently. We certainly wouldn't have Grok trying to promote, uh, you know, uh, Elon Musk's business and political priorities. We would have something else, even if the rules would either be open source or derived by consensus, but they would be transparent. You could tune your AI to deliver the kinds of things that you want, rather than these black boxes that most of them currently use.
Yeah.
So yeah, it could be, but the people who are developing AI now are highly reactionary people. They pass themselves off as revolutionary change makers, but they're actually highly reactionary in that they're trying to preserve their own monopolies, preserve their own wealth, even preserve their own psyche exactly as it is and upload it to the chip, right? They're the ones who are resisting the kinds of even democratic change that would happen with a distributed computer or intelligence infrastructure.
And I'm also wondering, Douglas, if we're now seeing smaller groups of people, not the big tech corporations, building local social media communities. And in fact, using big tech and using AI to do that, almost turning those products against the creators of them. Do you see that as another hopeful sign that actually we can, if you like, take back control as as humanity?
Yeah, or vibe coding as they call it. Yeah, where I thought for a long time, the last 10 years or so, that we were going to be shifting from a one size fits all Facebook Insta universe to something much more like, Discord or private bulletin boards or even Reddit, where I think people are realizing that you don't need every message and idea that you have to reach the entire world. And it's really hard to have these streams that are global. And what about reaching 20 or 200 or even 2,000 people that are part of a community of interest? It's Your goal is different then, right? The goal is no longer to get famous. The goal is to make progress in your area. I mean, you might actually, if there's 2,000 professors who in my field who know what I'm doing and care about what I'm doing, I'm going to be fine. But that's commercially fine. If there's 2,000 plumbers who respect my hinge maintenance strategies, that's cool. That's what you need. If you're going on public, or not public, but global generic networks, then it's like everybody wants to be Taylor Swift, and it just doesn't really work. You've got to go to least common denominator, sex and violence, and other insanity to do that. So yeah, I do see that people are programming those things. I know someone in New York who's wants to develop something like couch surfing, but for anything, where anybody can lend or borrow or gift stuff that they have extra. These are easy things to program, particularly if you go to chat and say, make this thing.
Yeah, absolutely. We've talked quite a lot, and it's been great about corporatism. What we haven't touched on is the link between corporatism and politics, and the fact that it's very difficult today to separate the two. So when we're talking about power and control, people argue that the big corporations have politicians in their pockets. So, it seems really hard to imagine that they won't win again. they seem to have done it before. You say, and I agree with you, it's gone back to the Middle Ages. The connection between state and commerce has been very strong. So what could be different this time? How can we make a difference and actually make this digital revolution truly human and moral?
In a way, it feels like three different questions to me.
Sorry.
But it's maybe just because I think of things differently. The way I try to make a difference is as locally as possible.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm answering the request to do podcasts when I can. I'm trying to do 2 a day.
Thank you.
That's the problem with writing too many books. I wrote a bunch of books and it led people to believe I know something or have an answer. I don't. I'm an artist, I'm just singing a song to help people understand that, to articulate what people are feeling, not to provide some answer. And the answers I do have are unsatisfying to people, but they're real. For me, it's borrow and lend stuff from people where you live. Do things for your neighbors. The government no longer works, and the corporate sector does not have your best interests at heart. So the most strategic thing you can do is reduce your dependence on them and reduce their power in the process. So if you need, this is the story I kept telling in my last book tour, I needed to borrow a drill to hang up a picture in my house. And the first thing that occurs to most people is, go to the Home Depot and buy a minimum viable product drill and use it once and put it in the garage. Maybe use it again a year or two later, and it won't even recharge, and you throw it out, right? So you've sent kids into the rare earth mine to make the thing. You've used all this carbon footprint. You used a thing once. You spent $49, and then you've thrown it on a toxic waste heap in Brazil, where some other peasant child is going to pick at it to find the reusable part, the little renewable lithium, whatever, to sell it to Apple so they can say they're a green company. Where what you could have done was walk down the street, knocked on your neighbor's door and said, "Bob, can I borrow a drill?" And why are we so afraid to do that? It's been trained out of us. Who are you to borrow a drill? Or if you borrow a drill from Bob, then Bob's going to want something from you. What's Bob going to want? Is he going to want to come over to the barbecue party you have that weekend? And what if you do? You invite him because he lent you the drill, so you let him come to the party. And what's the problem? Well, that the other neighbors are going to see that you had Bob over and want to know, why aren't they over? So before long, you've invited your whole block to have a barbecue with you in your backyard. And this is the nightmare. Right? This is the thing that we're trying to avoid. And that's the hell. But if we start doing that, well, then we think, well, do we need so many? Does every family on the block need to have a drill? Does every family need to have a snowblower and a lawnmower? What if we had 2 lawnmowers for 10 people? What does that look like? Well, we've bought less stuff. Someone invariably gets up when I talk about that, and they say, well, yeah, but what about the drill company? What about the lawnmower company? What are they going to do? And then all the shareholders of that company and the old lady who lives on your block who's depending on those coupons from the lawnmower company in order to pay for her retirement. Well, that's going to unwind, isn't it? But the good thing is that the more we're taking care of each other, the longer we have to wait before the government gets here when there's a flood or an earthquake. Because in America, those agencies are gone. The less we're buying from these corporations, the less power they have over us, the less dependent we are on these brittle, giant supply chains from, China to Chicago to New York to Thailand. It's crazy. And it's not like we can do everything that way. I get it. We won't get our iPhones that way, but we could probably get 70 or 80% of what we actually need from around us.
So that really leads nicely to your new project, because you are doing something. You are working with some people in the And Us labs. Did I say that correctly? And Us?
Yeah, get it? AI and us.
Yeah. And Us, exactly. AI and Us. So this is your new big project. Tell us about it. What inspired its creation, and how does it challenge the dominant models of tech development?
Well, and interesting. It wasn't my idea, but a guy I know who'd been working at a big public relations firm had been, a reader of my stuff and kept bringing me into various meetings they had to talk about technology and ethics and the future and what do we actually do. And then he saw kind of the writing on the wall that the American capitalism as we know it is almost gone, that all these companies believe they're going to be disrupted beyond belief by these new technologies, and came to the conclusion that we have a 3 or 4 year window to embed these, AI technologies and models with the values that we want to see replicate throughout the world. So he asked if I would partner with him as the, kind of the Marshall McLuhan guy who understands this stuff. Can I come and he can either, translate it to or get it into companies, organizations, governments, because they're all really scared. They're all really confused. And rather than have tech companies answer them with, the tech company's interests at heart, all tech companies really want to do is commoditize every other business, right? Become the only competitive advantage you could have. So I'm just speaking the truth, which is nice. And finally, in a place where when I speak the truth, companies don't just take it as a provocation. Now they realize, oh, this guy was right for 30 years, and it seems like he's right about this. And they're welcoming the idea that they could participate, mindfully and purposefully with agency in the way this stuff rolls out, and to think of it more iteratively, more like an art form than just more extraction.
Yeah, indeed. You talk about tools built for communities in Anders Labs. What kind of tools are you imagining or building right now? Could you share an example with us?
Oh God, there's so many. I mean, the one I'm the biggest fan of is I was saying is the civic stack. Creating a public stack or even a community stack, and what would that look like? The public servers, public models, that a real alternative for people to go to. We did it with Wikipedia. Wikipedia was better than Expedia. It was better than any of that stuff. We did it with Linux, which is still on all the servers. It was a piece of shareware. It was an open source piece of software. So there's no reason to think we wouldn't also win if we did it with AI. And what would that look like? Some kind of a global, tunable, mutually owned thing that would just it would change this crazy race. Donald Trump said yesterday, America is going to win the race for AI. It's like, there is no race. There is no race. There's only a race because they believe whoever gets AI will be able to control reality, be able to hypnotize global society into whatever belief system it wants, which we'll see. It was interesting the last few days where Donald Trump put out a fake AI of Obama being arrested by him, and then South Park put out one of Donald Trump naked in the desert, trying to promote an awful version of religion, I guess. So it's interesting that I feel like we're going to have some War of the Worlds moments. Where, remember when Orson Welles created this radio broadcast in America about aliens coming from Mars, and many Americans thought it was real.
So many people believed it. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and they were all going in their cars trying to leave town and escape to the woods, and it was crazy. It was big. And Orson Welles was very clever. He also did F is for Fake, this movie. He kind of understood something about the fake news reality, William Randolph Hearst and Citizen Kane. He was really prescient as to where we were ending up now with all this fakery. But there's that. Another project I'm really interested in is giving AIs the chance to, or really building large language models on something other than Western languages. We have subject-object language, certainly in English. I do something to her. I'm the subject, she's the object. So kind of a colonialism, if you will, is built into our linguistic structures.
Yeah.
And there are other kinds of intelligences with other kinds of languages. Even to use a fun example, what's the language of mycelia? Of mushrooms. Mushrooms taught trees how to make roots. What would they teach us through AI? What would be their language? How do we find that out? Or indigenous languages, or Navajo, or what if AIs were using Mayan glyphs, which are weird time-based pictorial hieroglyphs rather than sequential language the way we are.
Yeah.
What if they use those to develop their outputs? They would end up with very different logic. So I'm interested in that. I'm real interested in just going into companies and organizations and finding 10 or 20 people who want to be part of an AI innovation lab and teaching them how to think generatively and letting them really think out loud and together about how do we want to use this technology in our company or organization in a way that promotes the culture of the thing we're doing rather than negates the culture of the thing we're doing. Culture is the enemy of the tech companies. That's the thing. Because culture is interstitial. Culture is intuitive. The culture's the thing that grows on a medium. It's the infection, it's the viral thing. So how do you implement a technology in a way that promotes the culture? And each culture is going to know how to do that. So that's why what we want to do is go in and rather than let these companies accept a one-size-fits-all AI solution the way like they would incorporate Lotus Notes, into their IT process, rather to go, no, this is something that you're going to have to integrate consciously because the people making these things don't have your best interests at heart.
Absolutely. I love that you just brought the concept of culture, corporate culture, into this. Anders Labs seems to resist personalization in favor of collectivism. In a world where tech is hyper individualized, how do you design for us rather than me? And I think this is a really important point philosophically, because as you'll know, Western philosophy is very individually rights driven, whereas for most of our history, and certainly in terms of Asian Confucian philosophy, it's very much collective and duty driven.
Right.
And I often argue that human rights don't exist unless other human beings have a duty, fulfill their duty to respect and honor those rights that we give to other people. So it's a really interesting thread for me, this question of personalization and individualism versus collectivism. That's a big shift in terms of our culture.
Yeah, it is. It is. It's funny. That's the book I wrote before this last one. It was called Team Human. And that's my podcast. My vodcast is Team Human, the idea that being human is a team sport.
Yeah.
And that, anything that leads us to think of ourselves individually kind of isn't really our friend. And anything that helps us genuinely socialize is. And the technologies that we're using, all of these various misnomered social media actually prevent us from developing genuine rapport. Even, we'll have this talk over the video, and I'll know in my head that you agreed with me and you validated me and you said you believe me, but I'm not on a bodily level. I can't get the social cues that I would normally depend on, that 500,000 years of evolution have made me expect. I can't see if your pupils are getting larger. I can't perceive those things. So I end the call in a state of cognitive dissonance, where I think he says he believes me and cares about me, but I didn't get the mirror neuron oxytocin thing. So it actually engenders distrust more than trust. And the more we live on platforms that are developed by hyper individual billionaire sociopaths, who create things.
Narcissists.
Right. This is an iPhone. It's not a Wii phone. Right. It's an iPhone.
Oh, I love that. I love that.
The more alone we get. And you have to realize, though, that some of the people who turned out to be really good at digital capitalism, I'm not saying they're the best designers, but the winners of digital capitalism turn out to be people who are hyper individual, people who do think each of us is alone, people who do believe that if I upload my brain to the computer and spread my genotypes and phenotypes to the rest of the world, that the world would be better, that the world would be better if it was made in my image. Because I'm scared of women, I'm scared of nature, I'm scared of other people, and all that. I either have to pedestal them or dominate them. I can't be with them in a genuine way. That, yeah, you end up with these highly unethical relationships. It's back to the distancing effect. That in the AI are all these people that you don't see, all these other humans toiling or having value extracted from them, or having created the data on which all these models were built and are now unrecognized. Again, the idea that you need to own your data so that you have the IP, so that you can get the money for it, even that might be obsolete. The idea, I get it, creators want to own the rights to their own stuff, but only because they live in an economy where if you don't, you'll be screwed. A musician you'd play music. You just play music. You wouldn't even have to record the stuff. You just play the music.
I can't remember the name of the author of this quote, but something that stuck with me a long time ago was this quote from Sweden, a Swedish guy who said, "Money shared is money halved. Knowledge shared is knowledge doubled." And I absolutely love that. And I think that, for me, really helps to encapsulate the value of a gifting economy, of a return to a barter economy, if you like, and so on. Let's just step back a bit and look at the bigger picture and some closing reflections, if we can, Douglas. What does a healthy human-AI relationship look like, in your view? What should it look like?
I mean, we don't really have AIs yet, right? We have LLMs. A healthy relationship with those, I mean, we actually know now from an MIT study that we just featured at Andis, actually, in our conference 2 days ago. We brought the researcher in. What she found was that if you use an AI first and then work on a problem, your brain doesn't fire in an appropriate way. You don't make lots of connections. Where if you work on a problem and then use AI, you maximize the number of connections. So I think the way to use AI is engage with the problem yourself first. Think about it. pose the questions. You don't have to come up with answers. I'm not big on answers anyway, as you can tell. So whatever, I'm big on questions, but interrogate, really understand your research question. What do you want to know? How does this work? And then go to the AI as a knowledgeable person who's interrogated the issue, and you end up creating more and more brain configurations around the problem. All the different parts of your brain light up, even more than if you never had the AI in the first place. But if you go there first looking for an answer, you don't retain, you don't remember, your brain's just like on jelly.
Totally. Thinking about if you like, a message of hope, climbing the hill of hope from the ditch of despair that many people find themselves in. What are the current AI projects, tools, or communities you feel are heading in the right direction? Who gives you hope, Douglas?
I mean, I'm not looking at AI communities for hope personally. Who gives me hope really are people doing permaculture, people creating intentional communities and alternative things. I mean, the place where I guess AI gives me hope are people who are using it to do the vibe coding we were talking about before. People who say, I've had this idea, but I've never had the engineering resources, the developers to build it. And it's really not that hard if someone could just do it, and the AI can build it and let people create an alternative to Uber, an alternative to Grubhub, that anyone could order food from any restaurant at non-usury prices for the restaurant, where we can create favor banks and local currencies and even citizens' councils and working on issues, new forms of deliberation. So I'm seeing some stuff, the beginnings of stuff, and I wouldn't name them as such because it's not like they're big, nameable, scalable things. They're distributed and individual. I would say go to the university near you and see who's working on that maybe in the graduate program. You can find that online. Ask Chat, or Gemini, who's doing something where you are, and you may be surprised.
Indeed. So, like me, you're in your 60s. I think my works, I'm at the beginning of my work still. I don't know if you feel the same way, Douglas. One of my role models is Sir David Attenborough, who is 99 and has made a big difference to the way we think about the world we're despoiling at the moment. Thinking forward to when you're 99, looking back, what do you hope that ordinary people, technologists, ethicists, philosophers, and others will take away from the work you're doing right now and the work you've been doing over the last 20 or 30 years? What's your legacy?
I don't know. I would hope to spend the next 30 years getting over the ambition to have a legacy. I'm really coming to believe that it's what we're doing in the moment that matters, that we are metabolizing this thing together. We're metabolizing this grief and trauma and anguish that's all around us. And I guess if I'm remembered as such, I don't really believe in life and death and all that way. When I'm in certain states, the people who are gone show up. They're still around. They're still in the swirl. And I hope to the extent that that I'm remembered as people are dealing with things and processing things, it would be as someone who shared their um, their confusion, their amusement, and their compassion. You know, that I'm just there. You know, you think about, it's like everybody's in this dream and really scared. And if I could be there in memory, say, if I could be there, the way a shaman who's long dead might show up in somebody's ayahuasca trip, right? If I could somehow be there, and provide reassurance and provide just a wink, you know, that's what that's what all the sentences are for. Oh, right. Rushkoff kind of said this this is okay. This has been experienced, and that'd be more than enough.
That's wonderful, Douglas Rushkoff. You've been a fantastic guest for us, our first ever guest on the CHATROG podcast. Nothing to do with OpenAI. I emphasize from a legal perspective. Thank you so much for your time, for your questions, as well as your answers. And you are a true philosopher. Philosophers ask the right questions. We don't know many of the answers. And I think you've really helped us to see both of that. I hope that sounded like a compliment. It was meant as a compliment.
No, it is. I'm glad. Yeah, that's what I was worried about all day yesterday. I was like, oh God, people are coming to me for answers. I really don't know what the fuck is going on.
All our listeners and viewers. Thank you for joining us. We're new at this. Please send your feedback, and hope you enjoyed the first CHATROG podcast. Again, thank you, Douglas, and please do subscribe and like the podcast when it starts descending on social media. Douglas, thanks again, and have a wonderful weekend.